Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming back and watching more of Peter and Sylvia talking about mental health in general and mental health and well-being in business in particular. As you know, we are picking up different topics that are either hot in the press and the media or something that just Sylvia and I have been talking about for a while. And if you have followed the media, social media and everything else in the last year or so, perhaps and more, you would have heard about the Great Resignation. You will have heard about the Great, what's it called, reshuffle, the Great all sorts of things.
Lots of greats.
Lots of greats. And we're just thinking, are we now in the middle of the Great Reimagination? Are we thinking about things differently? And if we are, what are those things we are trying to reimagine? And what does it do to us in general?
It's interesting because, as you say, what cropped up during the pandemic was the Great Resignation. A lot of people may have heard about that. It came up from the Deloitte report earlier on this year about, I think it was 28% of employees had either left their job in 2021 or were planning to leave in 2022. So it'd be interesting to see what those figures, how they manifested themselves. I think is it 62% cited poor mental health as the reason they would be leaving. And I think a lot of people thought that the Great Resignation would go away once they had the pandemic and people getting back to normal, whatever that normal is for each organisation. But apparently there's quite a lot of talk now in quite a few publications. I think Deloitte, Harvard Business Review, Forbes are now talking about the Great Reimagination, another great. And apparently now it's about re-architecture, recharge, reinvent, rethink, reshuffle, refocus what's being achieved in workplaces. Now, is this, as you say, just another lot of words? But it's interesting how there are 5 generations now in a workplace, and each of those generations will want different things. So how can we reinvent or reimagine, capturing all those different generations? Because I imagine they all want different things.
They absolutely do. And I think we always wanted different things. And talking about reimagination, if you can imagine the background on my screen right now being a lot brighter than it is, it would be great. But right now, the skies are drawing in and there'll be a lot of rain coming down. So it's just my light changing. But if you look at a bigger picture of why we go to work, at some point we went to work to survive. We had no loyalty to our employers. They could do to us what we wanted. We wanted to survive. Probably back in the Industrial Revolution, thereabouts. And then moving on to other times, when I was studying, I was a student in the 80s and graduated in 1990 first. And it was all about status, status of life, standard of life. That's why we went to work. We wanted to have all those good things out there, all the materialistic stuff. Moving on to where we are today, it's more about quality of life and content of life. It has to mean something. And not only do we have different generations of birth days and years, but we also have different, almost like revolutions in the big world out there, in the working world. And when you mix all of this together, of course, we have to reimagine something. But I think we've always done that. I was the young generation once. I'm one of the baby boomers. And when I first got into the job market, I was thin-skinned. I was maybe the equivalent of today's snowflake. I wanted something different. I saw the elders in the business and I thought, oh my God, what dinosaurs are they? Because I thought I knew everything. And they probably didn't like me an awful lot either, because I was the new one who was perhaps challenging things, didn't understand an awful lot. So all of this something, is that anything new, or is it just a normal life cycle that we go through?
It's interesting. things do seem to go in cycles, don't they? As you know, the way of the world. And it's interesting, this rethink, reframe, whatever it is. Picking up on a point you said earlier. People went to work many years ago, job for life, the loyalty for life. You had your pay packet every month, job done. Now people move around a lot more. Does that generate quality? Does that generate a standard of life? A lot of people talk about work-life balance, and that shifted to work-life boundary. And what is it that people want from their lives? Quality. We talk about quality. This area of quality or standards. What is it that we're wanting from that? And each generation will want different things. I know, like you, when I first started working, I just simply wanted a job. That was it. End of. I wanted a job. I wanted to be paid so I could go and do the things that I wanted to do and pay the bills. Now, at the other end of the scale, my wants and needs from the workplace are very, very different. And it's interesting how this thing about reimagine what? What is it that individuals want? How can I reimagine something if I don't know what my options are? And I think for a lot of people, it could actually be very confusing. What is it that I do want? Reimagine what? Reimagine it too. And I think, yeah.
I think it is very confusing. Every time you reimagine something, you're learning, you're developing something new. And there is a process that we go through, and it does have its periods of utter confusion and frustration and throwing toys out of the pram and everything else. And then you have a lot of young people going into the job market, into employment, as you do always. And I think they mostly go into companies where the owners, the employers, the bosses are of an older generation. So there will be that clash. There will be that challenge for everybody to bend towards each other, because it can't be that one generation is always right and the other is always wrong. And as you said, we've got about 5 generations in the workforce, and they all want different things. So the one size fits all approach to employee benefits, for example, simply doesn't work. I don't need childcare benefits. I'm not particularly interested in a gym membership. Maybe I should be. But we are at different stages in our lives, and different things are important to us. And it is a big ask for employers to cover all of that. And this is where I think we need to engage with one another in the workplace. There's a big word out there that's been for a while called employee engagement. And I think it's great, but it shouldn't be just one way. It's not just the employees engaging with the business. It's also the business, the employers engaging with the employees. So it becomes a full circle, a two-way street kind of thing. And again, not everybody wants that. Like you, some turn up, they just want a job. Some want a job, some want a career. Some couldn't give 2 hoots about the business.
It's interesting you say that about the engagement, because it's very difficult when you talk about employee engagement for an employer to engage so many different generations that all want different things. And then within each generation, the individuals may want different things too. But equally, there are so many that simply want to go to work, earn a living and go home. And I wonder whether all this talk about the Great Resignation, the Great Reimagination, the Great this, the Great that, and standard and quality, whether we can overthink it. We can think too much. And a lot of people can get a bit bamboozled, and it could potentially cause them quite a lot of pressure, stress, or distress even. What is it that I want? Should I be thinking about this? Should I be thinking about that? Rather than just being and doing whatever it is that works for them. I think there's so much talk out there, it can actually almost generate the confusion, and perhaps wonder where we're thinking too deeply about all this.
It's entirely possible to overthink things. That's what I help a lot of my clients with, when they've overthought all sorts of things, and we have to unpick and put things on the right shelves. But if we understand what we want, well, who are we? If the company doesn't have a clear purpose, for example, reason why are we in business other than to make money, there must be a reason why we want to be in business. If that is not communicated to everybody else, if that is not lived in the business, nobody can then come in and feel any sort of affiliation or association with that business because they don't know where it's going or why. So I think there is a case to answer that we should find a common purpose. So most people these days, so I hear, want to have a purpose for going to work. They want to identify with what they do. And if they can't do that, well, they will get disgruntled. They will go somewhere else where they can find that. But maybe the company they left will be backfilled with people who are of a different attitude and mindset and will be perfectly happy working there. So is there a global solution? I don't think so. I think there is a solution, a way forward for each individual organization. And it is for each individual organization to figure out what works best for them.
I think there's a lot more people these days are thinking about what organisation they want to work for in terms of engagement in what is their mission, what's their vision, what is their business. Do I actually want to work for someone who does X, Y, and Z rather than just taking a job? It doesn't matter where it is. I think there's a lot more thinking around that. In terms of employee engagement. Now, I suppose it really depends what employee engagement means. Does that employee engagement in the working practices of an organisation and educating those that work for that organisation as to what the business is, what it does and what it doesn't do? Or is it engagement in terms of the mental health and well-being and all those sort of angles? Or is it a bit of both? Is it everything? I do think a lot more people are thinking about who they work for rather than just taking the job. I think that's an element that has changed quite significantly over the years. I don't know what you think about that, Peter, but that's been something that you've experienced.
One of the big things that I know has changed is ethics. People want to work for an ethical company. They want to buy from an ethical company. So the whole business of ESG or CSR, corporate social responsibility, is a big thing. I just fear at the moment is like just getting a badge. We're doing it for the sake of the badge rather than actually living it and feeling it. But the trend, as far as I can see, is going toward being more involved with the community, being more environmentally friendly, being more ethical in the way we do business. And that, I think, is the biggest change that I have noticed, that has become so important that people will walk out or will not join if they feel that it's an unethical business.
I also wonder again whether it's a generational thing too. Is it the older generation are not as mindful of that as the younger generation? For example, a young 20-year-old, will they be thinking more, do I want to go and work for, say, an oil company or a mining company? Whereas someone at the older end of the generation scale, it wouldn't cross their mind as much. I just wonder whether, again, there's a generational thing as to the engagement in the business of the product that the business is doing, and which then sort of then links back to this reimagination of I'm working at this company. So if I imagine I'm working at that company, what's that going to do for me? Whereas if I imagine I'm working at that company, what's that going to do for me? So it gives those people the options, but at the same time, it can be very confusing.
It can be. And I think what we're doing in general is now we're asking more questions. Whereas before it was a case of let's get a job. Let's get onto the career path and then live with whatever it throws at us because I want my career or I want my job. I think across age groups these days, people are asking more questions. And that can't be a bad thing, but it's also a confusing thing because the employers will have to come up with the answers. The employers are also asking questions and the employees will have to come up with the answers. And somewhere in all this mess, we have to meet in the middle and find the compromises as to what will work. And this is where I think we will have a period still, wars in the world or pandemics in the world or whatever. We are in the middle of rethinking, reimagining everything and a lot of things. And it's the dust hasn't settled yet, I think, and we are still trying to figure out what is important and what isn't.
But is that something that just happens anyway?
I think it is.
We're always moving, we're always rethinking, we're always doing better, we're always whatever, as to growing and developing. Does it actually need a name or a label given to it? Because that's something as human beings we generally do all the time. We're looking for doing things differently, looking for better ways of doing something, more efficiency, more productivity, doing things in a better way, cheaper, all those things. It's like society has to give something a name to then give it the next step and the next step and the next step for something we're doing anyway.
I don't think we are reinventing the wheel. We are probably just putting a new tire on it. And it would be great to hear from everybody what you think about the great something or other. What are your
next one you want? The great.
What are your thoughts? Yes, Sylvia. What is the next thing we're going to be doing? Let us know your thoughts and your ideas. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Sylvia, and hope you enjoyed listening. And we'll be back another day with another topic. Thank you for watching.
See you later. Bye bye.